Hey everyone, welcome back to Tactical Magic. This is Molly Mandelberg, your host, and I am joined today with a brilliant leader and expert, and we are going to be talking about resilience. Not only that, we're also going to take a look through the window of the Enneagram. So if you've been interested in that school of thought, or if you don't even know what it is and you want to know more, stick around. We'll be back in just a sec.
It's not just about mastering technology. It's not just about brand or messaging. It's not just about making more money. It's about showing up in a big way so your people can find you. This is about bringing your most wild and authentic self into the hustle and grind. Welcome to Tactical Magic, a business strategies podcast for the warrior goddess entrepreneur.
All right. So Robyn McTague is the creator of A Life of Choice, coaching and consulting. She's also a speaker and author. Many life changes resulted in Robyn learning resiliency at a young age and led to deeply studying what drives us and how to create a life of freedom and choice. She uses her extensive knowledge to blend scientific and metaphysical techniques, which allows a unique holistic perspective and integration of who we are so we can live our lives authentically, be engaged, and handle what comes our way. Welcome to the show, Robyn.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So would you tell us a little bit, because usually people listening to the show are sometimes on their journey to becoming an entrepreneur or a leader or a facilitator, or they're already on that road and they're always looking for inspiration. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey into doing the work that you're doing now?
Well, it started, of course, being young and having many challenges with, very dysfunctional family, suicidal mom, alcoholic dad, no stability growing up, lived with other families, foster care, all these different things. So certainly I had to learn a lot of resiliency and learn to be really independent as well. So I think that helped me to get through that because I had to really take that approach of being an adult as a child. No one was there to really support me and nurture me. So I had to kind of take that on myself. And then I looked for all those secure things in my life. I went to work for a job that was union, worked there for 34 years. I made sure that I could buy an apartment, so I have my stability there. And so all these ways of thinking I was creating stability, got into a relationship, thinking that that was the way to have some more stability. And it turned out it was one of the worst decisions. I mean, certainly I learned, but it wasn't a healthy relationship because I didn't know how to break some of those patterns from the past. I ended up marrying someone who had that same anger issue that my father had. So as we learn in psychology, we repeat those patterns until we're aware of them. And even though I'd always been curious, I'd always been quite aware. And I remember being a kid, even a teenager, thinking, why are some people more aware than others? Why isn't everyone aware of what's going on around them and, how we interact with each other? So really from a young age, I really wanted to know why people did what they did. And part of that was my view on life. And the other was just how could people be so mean to each other and not treat people well? And so my big shift came when I was 44 and diagnosed with breast cancer, and I'd been doing everything for everyone else, right? Working full time, doing the union work, the strata council, and there wasn't any time left for me. And my health just gave out. And that was really the turning point where I learned the meditational system I teach now, and I started to become more secure in who I was really and confident so I could leave work early and start that entrepreneurial journey. So for me, I wanted that safety mechanism that was so important to me, whereas other people can just go for it. But for me, there was that place, well, I need some stability. So not making myself wrong for it. And then just learning other tools. I was constantly a lifelong learner. I was degree in psychology, counseling, conflict resolution, and thought field therapy, and then added more metaphysical things as I went on. And yeah, I just love helping people to see that they can shift that perspective. We can change our neural pathways. We can have that choice to choose differently, no matter how difficult or challenging it is. And that's really, to me, what resiliency is.
Awesome. Yeah, I feel like can we dig into that word resiliency a little bit more? Because I think there's uh, a sort of skewed way of interpreting it that is, I'm resilient, so I can get through anything, or I'm resilient, so I can hustle and grind, or I can use my tenacity to sort of grin and bear whatever is coming to me. But there's a different angle on resiliency, which is a little bit more about tending to oneself to expand their resiliency. Can you just speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, because really that's what it is. Because, if you believe in some of the metaphysical things around like our body, like for me, it was breast cancer, the nurturing. So, yes, I had that, push through it, but I wasn't listening to my body. I wasn't listening to my emotions. Those had been stuffed down. So, all of these things made me to that point where I, totally shut down. So, resiliency is really knowing what we need, bringing in the self-awareness so that we are not striving to follow someone else, right? So much of what's happened since COVID is people want more integration in their lives. They don't want to separate their lives out so much. And we've done that for so long in our life, in our society, and that's all shifting. And to me, that's a big part of resiliency, is bringing those different parts of ourselves together. So we're speaking to those different parts of ourselves and understanding it. And then it's like, what do I really need? What are those wants and desires? What are the practical things? So really more of a holistic perspective of mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and physically.
Yeah. One of the things I love about the Enneagram, which I would love you to sort of define and explain the Enneagram for those who have never heard of it, but it is kind of almost like a cheat sheet into some of our inner workings as different people. I know personality tests can be taken a little too far when we lean into them, and sometimes they're also really useful to see ourselves through a new lens so that we can expand and grow as a person, knowing that some part of this is our operating system. So will you just tell us a little bit about the Enneagram and maybe give us a way of relating that resiliency work through that lens?
Sure. And what's interesting for me when I found my type, and that's what a lot of people find, it's like, oh, that all makes sense. That's that lens of how I see the world. So there's 9 different types. And originally it was just more for the spiritual realm. And then in the 60s, the psychological aspect was brought in. And so we can use it really as a map or a growth plan for ourselves. So seeing where those defense mechanisms came in really young, and how we came into this world with this perspective. And then our upbringing kind of helped to mold that and kind of brought certain aspects out. So, from the perspective of the Enneagram and neurobiology, we do come in with our personality type, and then it's kind of molded. And we also come in, the Enneagram explains that we feel something's missing in our life. And so there's this search, and that's what kind of builds that lens. For me as a 6, it's that security, that safety, because the childhood message I got was I wasn't safe. So it really helps to explain a lot in that awareness, and that's what I'm all about. But it also gives us what our gifting is. And I think that's part of my reason that I wanted to go so deep in it and get certified, is because we see a lot of memes out there. And it's with anything, right? We have that kind of superficial layer. But the problem is that it's getting us more stuck in that perspective of our personality. And really, the goal is to move beyond that, to have more perspective and see how we can move through it to that other side of, I don't have to be stuck in that fear. I can use that strength of my courage, and I've had to use it. So that's my resiliency key, is to really, how is that fear stopping me? What do I need to feel safe so I can use the courage to step up and step out? Because as an entrepreneur, I wouldn't be doing anything if I didn't use those skills as well. And it not only helps us individually, but it helps us working with other people. So we have 3 centers. We have the body center, the heart, and the head. And so for me as a head center, that filter is those, the thoughts that go on. So when I can learn to be more centered in my body and my heart, I can really relax. And to me, this is a real key to resiliency, because then I'm present to what's going on. I'm not, stuck in the past thinking, well, I didn't do it before, so I can't do it now, and I can't learn, or the future and what's next. So many entrepreneurs, we get into that shiny object syndrome, and I'm going to learn more, but how do we actually implement? We can't actually implement things in our life if we're not here and present. So it gives those different viewpoints, not just for ourselves, but for other people. So if you're working with other people, it's a real gift to be able to say, oh, I see that they're kind of more focused on the relationship piece than I am. So I know that I need to connect more with them, that I need to maybe sometimes create more boundaries, because, as helpers and givers, as a lot of us are, that's where we can get into trouble. And then we don't have the resiliency because we haven't kept our cup full and our health, right? So we don't learn boundaries, and usually they're, pushed against. And when we learn that, it's really difficult. So I believe the Enneagram is another really great way to see, what are the boundaries I need to build in my life so I do have the health and the vitality and everything that I need to really be successful in my personal and professional life.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's such a valuable lens, and it isn't like other typing systems. Like, human design is amazing and intricate, and you can easily get your chart. What I found I've taken multiple tests for the Enneagram, and I finally went to a workshop, and the quiz results that I received about my Enneagram type never quite felt right. And every time I would take the quiz, I would have different numbers for my type. And then I finally went to a workshop and, had to raise my hand a few times to discuss this with the facilitator of the room at the time. But I ended up being an 8, which the quiz responses never told me that I was an 8. But once I actually started looking deeper into it, it landed me. I sunk into, oh, that's the lens I've been looking through. And there was maybe some resistance, or there was some facade I had been putting up in the world, trying to be some version of something that maybe wasn't really my true self. And that gave me a lens to see myself through. That was such a relief. It was like, oh, I can just be that. That's like the most natural state of being for me, is in some of that energy. And it also gives you, like you said, sort of a journey or a map of how to evolve as a person who is an 8 or who is a 6 or whatever. It gives you tools. So tell me a little bit about the work that you do with your clients and how this is a useful tool for, supporting them and helping them build successful relationships and connections in their lives.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point. And I try to tell people that, but people, it's like, oh, just give me the test. And it's only an indicator.
Yeah.
The test can't get into the specifics of why you're doing it. That's why we need to do the interview. If people do take a test, I say, okay, well, let's look at those top 3 maybe and see, does any of those resonate? When you're doing this, what comes up for you? What is the reason you're doing it? Because people kind of confuse the thing that we're doing, right? It's like, yeah, we all have emotions, for example, but why is that coming up? As for me, it might be the fear coming up because someone's not going to be safe. So I might yell at someone, we yell at a kid crossing the street because it's not safe. They haven't looked. But for you, it could be because something else. So we have to look at that deeper meaning. And I actually got into the Enneagram through the motivational map, which again is 9 different motivators. And it's partly based on the Enneagram, and I saw how specific that was. So then I got into the Enneagram. And what I like about both of those assessments, it isn't just telling you something, it's giving you a way to actually move through things, like you were saying, right? It's that path for growth. And we can go really deep with the Enneagram. We can do some basic things and then even go deeper, like shadow work. I love working with that. So the example I like to give is jealousy. Why would I want to feel jealous? So I'm not, when it comes up, I'm not going to feel it. So it goes into the background, becomes shadow, and then it comes out in these weird ways in my life, and then I self-sabotage. But if I could actually look at jealousy, why is that there? What is that actual reason that it came in? Usually there's a positive reason for it. And so I found for myself, it just tells me that I desire something. So it doesn't have that same grip on me anymore. So I can say, oh, yeah, I desire that. Yes, I would like to have that trip maybe, or have that specific goal met in my business, whatever it is. So that way I can just place it and it doesn't really grip me the same way it used to. And one of the main ways is really looking at how does that impact not only how you're presenting to the world and that, like you said, that facade, so we can be more authentic, because we all have value. We all want to be authentic. But what happens is we can do it in a kind of that kind of around the loop way, I call it, right? We start and we're not really direct in what we're doing. Just like a conversation when I'm training people with conflict resolution, it's like, can you actually say what you mean? What do you actually want? We have that challenge with being honest with ourselves and being able to be vulnerable. To me, this is a big piece of the Enneagram, is finding that place where we can feel vulnerable enough and safe enough within ourselves to express what we need and want. And that's what's going to attract clients and people to you, because the more that you're real, the more they want that, and the more you're going to have a really clear, direct communication. You're going to build that intimacy, and intimacy doesn't mean necessarily, those romantic relationships. It's a scale, right? From we have this reciprocity where, I'm speaking, you're speaking, instead of that one way kind of direction, all the way to those more romantic relationships. So it's a skill that we can build and a way to work with clients and even networking. Like I found people, especially entrepreneurs, when they're networking, I had a type 1 and she didn't understand why she couldn't go deeper in the relationships, because it was all about, like, she was really gung-ho to have the relationships, but she didn't know how to go that next step. And so doing some work around that where she could relax a bit more and see, she wanted the best, but how it was playing out is she came across as a bit judgmental.
Mm.
And so that helped her to look at it a different way and kind of be more open to feedback and relaxing a bit and noticing when it comes up, but not having to be reactive to it. Like you were talking about the 8. So there can be that big energy, and some people feel, wow, that's too much for me. So sometimes we can adjust that level when we're aware of it. And I had someone who worked in the prison system. And so this was a really big deal, because there's a lot of people that, have to live there that do have that big energy and have a lot of anger. And instead of de-escalating, she was actually escalating when she was working with prisoners. So learning her scale from 0 to 10, and for her it was around 6, and she had noticed that, and it's like, oh, I need to kind of dial it down a bit in this interaction so we all feel safe and we can actually have the discussion that we need.
Yeah, it's a powerful thing to do the work of. I also just want to say, when you're going around in the world, like me trying to fit into being a 1 or a 7, it takes more energy than being you. It takes more energy to stuff the jealousy down than to look at it and actually move through it. It takes more energy to put the facade on than to be yourself. And it takes more energy to be worn down than to set a boundary. It takes courage to be yourself. It takes courage to set a boundary, but it takes more energy not to. So I just wanted to highlight that it actually, the easy route is actually more expensive in some ways, energetically.
Absolutely. And,
Yeah.
that's what we say about the Enneagram. If that type, be curious about your type. There's people I've come up where we have two, and I just do that practice of seeing what comes up for you during the day. And if it's not working and not giving you growth, then it's not your type,
Yeah.
so then look at what's the next part. So, I've known people, it's taken them a couple years to really find their type.
Yeah.
And that's okay, right?
That's
We
okay
don't,
because every exploration you go, you're learning more about yourself. And I think when we're speaking to those of you out there who are watching or listening, if you are on an entrepreneurial journey or if you're just on a spiritual journey, this is the real work, is being willing to acknowledge I wasn't the person I wanted to be in that moment, or I don't feel able to be the person I want to be in this moment. And as you become aware of that, having frameworks, having facilitators, having tools to lean into, to actually acknowledge it, to own it, to move through it, and to find a way to get beyond it. That is the most transformational work you can do. And it can be challenging to do it on your own. It's not impossible, but it can be a lot easier to have the support of somebody who is really familiar with these kinds of lenses, who's really familiar with these kinds of transformations and, sticking points, that it's worth it to invest in mentorship and support to fast track your way through that stuff. Because if we don't, we often will sort of surrender to, I didn't like how I treated that person in that moment, but that's just the way I am. And we close off our growth or close off our transformation by deciding we are a certain way and that's just who we are. It's like we cap our potential for more healing, more humanity, more resiliency, more fully expressed, thriving livelihood when we decide that we just are a certain way, even though we're kind of aware that way of being maybe isn't working for us. So I just want to highlight the potency of this kind of work. And I mean, we all have those moments. It doesn't matter how much of this kind of work you do in your life. There's often still going to be moments where you're like, I feel jealous, or that just came out of my mouth without me even recognizing why it was there. But it's once you have these tools in place and once you start to build that muscle of dexterity with self-awareness, that you can catch and reframe or heal or show back up to clean something up in a way that makes life just a little bit different and brings back that connection with other people. So I just wanted to point that out too.
yeah, I think that's beautiful, right? Because it's so much about, yes, it happened. What are you going to do about it now, right? That's when we really step up as our spiritual adulthood and and say, yeah, I was wrong, or that didn't go as well as I liked. And in the Enneagram, we talk about the heart center, and there's shame there, right? We all grow up with that. And it's like allowing that to come up and seeing it for what it is, and that often stops us. So the more that we can work on those different areas and just see what it is and how it came in at such early ages, because often what happened is our caregivers and the school system, all these things, they added the shame, so it wasn't really us. So when we can actually see it for what it is and just an old program and an old way of being, and having that ability to say, yeah, I want something different.
Yeah. So I imagine there are people who are leaning in right now wondering, okay, what would doing this work look like? So what are the best ways for people to get in touch or follow you? Or what do you have coming up that people could maybe look into or dig into?
Yes, I do teach active style of meditation as well, and I have some classes coming up, and I do some workshops on the Enneagram, and then offer one-on-one coaching. So I offer a package doing your motivational map and your Enneagram typing, and out of that you get some practices for your type, and usually it's about 3 sessions to really get you where you want to be and giving you some of that growth path and new perspectives. And you can reach me at alifeofchoice.ca because I'm in Canada. And my email is Robyn, ROBYN, at lifeofchoice.ca. I'm on LinkedIn and on Facebook. And yeah, just reach out. And I usually keep my events calendar up to date on my website. That's probably one of the best places to check.
Wonderful. We will link that, a lifeofchoice.ca, in the show notes for this episode. So if you're watching this, go check that out. If you have a friend who's into the Enneagram, or you have a friend who you think would like this episode, please go forward it to them real quick. Share the magic with somebody else if you've been listening this long and you've been vibing out with us. You've shared so much deep, powerful wisdom on this episode already. Are there any last words of wisdom you want to leave people with, Robyn?
I would say one of my mantras that I love to share with people from my conflict resolution training is be curious. All behavior makes sense. So it might not make sense to me, but it does to that other person. So how can we open up the dialogue and ask questions and not take things so personally? It helps us to kind of give that step back to say, what's going on with you? And kind of can soften our heart a bit and maybe find more compassion and kindness.
Love that. Beautiful. Awesome. Thank you so much for being on the show, Robyn.
Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you everyone out there for listening or watching. If you haven't already, definitely go download the Wild Hearts Rise Up app. There's a bunch of meditations. There's some peace with money magic in there, and there's some business strategies and tools. It's free for a month, and then it's only about $4.44, I think, after that, but you're free to just use it for a month. Whatever happens, thanks for watching this episode. Keep asking big questions and taking bold action, because you are here for a reason. Bye.